Go ahead and turn in your Bibles to 1 Kings. We are we're coming down close to the end of our series here. We're wrapping up with the Old Testament now, and we are coming to the conclusion of the monarchy of Israel. We have one more lesson tonight on the divided monarchy, and then next week we'll be looking at the monarchy after the destruction of Samaria and the exile coming up unto the life of Jesus. And then that'll be as far as we get in this chronology. We'll be getting into missions conference then, and then we'll be starting a new series after that. So tonight we begin with looking at a question. Who wrote 2 Kings? Is it an author or is it an editor? And first we need to define what the author was. Obviously there was an author, the person who wrote the content. The authors originally were probably prophets. So if you read the book of 1 Kings and 2 Kings, you are very commonly introduced to prophets, frequently introduced to prophets. Elijah, Elisha, other prophets make their appearance regularly. And in fact, entire chapters in these books are dedicated to recording the lives of these prophets, which might be a little bit surprising given that the books are called Kings. That's probably because the original authors of the material were prophets, and they were recording the events of the kings as they ministered to God's people in the nation of Israel. So the author's text, meaning the prophet's text, the text that they wrote, is different than two other frequently referenced documents that were written by a court recorder. So I want to take just a second here and read 1 Kings 4:3. As you read the reigns of David and Solomon, there is a lot of detail. It kind of decreases as you go through the other books and the other reigns. But starting here in 1 Kings 4, we see the names of the people who were in important places in Solomon's reign. Verse 3, Elihoreph and Ahiah, the son of Shisha, scribes, Jehoshaphat, the son of Ahilud, the recorder. Well, the role of recorder would have been someone who wrote down the events of the king's reign. And as we look at the books of Kings and Chronicles, very frequently we see this phrase, the Chronicles of the Kings of Judah, and a contrasted phrase, the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel. So let's go to chapter 14 in 1 Kings. Verse 29 is the kings of Judah. Now the rest of the acts of Rehoboam and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Judah? And then just a few verses before, verse 19, and the rest of the acts of Jeroboam, how he warred and how he reigned, behold, they are written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel. So we have two references, that it apparently was expected a reader in the time when the book was compiled would have had access to. But what we have today is the author, the prophet's records of the events. So then, because the books of Kings and Chronicles cover several hundred years, we can understand that it must have been the work of more than one man. But yet they are contained in a single book, and that means there was an editor, and we need to define the editor's role. So when you think of editor today, it might be a person who sits down, decides this word maybe needs to be a little bit different, punctuation needs to change, content, maybe they need to change this. That wasn't the editor that we're talking about here. The editor did not change the author's words, content, or material. Rather, he chose which parts to include in his compiled record of the kings. So who wrote 2 Kings, author or editor? Well, the authors wrote it, and the editor compiled it into the record we have today. And you can see evidence of this compilation effort as you read through the book. There are a couple of points in 2 Kings where information is repeated in a slightly different way. And actually, this can cause some confusion as you read through the record. We'll look at one of those events a little bit later tonight in this lesson. So there are 4 large divisions representing 4 authors' works. The first 10 chapters of 2 Kings focus specifically on Israel, and as I mentioned, it being the work of prophets, Elijah and Elisha feature quite prominently. Then there are 2 chapters roughly that focus on Jehosh of Judah. This was the king who reigned after Athaliah. That would be a record written by a Judean prophet from the kingdom of Judah. And then in chapters 13, the second half of chapter 13, all the way to chapter 15, the author comes again from the nation of Israel, and it's focusing on Israel's defeat of Judah and their interactions with Judah during their rivalries that went on during the reign of Azariah. In chapter 15 through chapter 18, which is the end of the book, the author is once again focusing on Judah, quite simply because there was no Israel for there to be a record of. At this point, the nation of Israel has been destroyed by Assyria, and the people have been taken into captivity. So these divisions can cause confusion when determining a king's length of reign, but they can cause confusion because the author or the prophet in the book of 2 Kings used his kingdom's system of dating when he recorded the date comparisons for all the kings that his particular record contains. So now we need to look at what happened to the dating systems after Jehu. We just said that 2 Kings chapter 1 through 10 was written by a prophet in Israel. We have talked multiple times these last few weeks that Israel used the non-accession year system, but then at Jehu's reign, they actually changed to accession year. And then as we read in chapters 11 and 13, the beginning, Judah, we see changing from accession year before Jehu's purge, and they moved to non-accession year. So all the dates in this period are given with the non-accession year reckoning. And then in chapter 13, 10 through 1531, because the writer is again from the nation of Israel, all of the dates that are given use the accession year reckoning. And then in chapter 15, because it changes to Judah, they're using non-accession year reckoning after their change. Unfortunately, there's another complication because Hezekiah once again changed the kingdom back to accession year reckoning. So there's a lot of changing happening there as a result of these 4 different sections in the book of 2 Kings. So let's just do a quick summary. I'm not going to dive into these super deep tonight. Summary of the dating systems. Unified Israel from Saul until Solomon used the civil calendar beginning in Tishri, and they used accession year reckoning. Now let's look at the kingdom of Judah after the division. So the kingdom of Judah from Rehoboam, that was Solomon's son, until Ahaziah, who was killed by Jehu, used the civil calendar just like Solomon and his predecessors had, and they used accession year. After Ahaziah was killed, when Athaliah became queen illegitimately by killing all of Ahaziah's children, Judah changed to non-accession year, and we'll mention why that probably happened in just a second. But then at Hezekiah's reign until the destruction by Babylon, Judah changed back to accession year. Now let's look at Israel. Under a unified Israel, Saul and Solomon, Saul until Solomon, we just said them, but Israel, beginning with Jeroboam until Joram, who was killed by Jehu, they changed to the religious calendar, which started in Nisan. Then they changed their dating system to non-accession year. After Jehu purged Ahab's wicked descendants from the northern kingdom, and until the destruction by Assyria, they used accession year. That's if you want to go back through and try to put all these into place. These are some things that you would need to know. We're going to talk about why they changed, and then it's not really going to have so much of an impact on the rest of our lesson until the very end. Why did the kingdoms change dating methods after Jehu's purge? Well, Judah was ruled by Athaliah, who was the daughter of Ahab. Ahab was the king of Israel. We talked about how one of the kings of Judah had made a serious compromise in his life, allowing the daughter of Ahab to marry his son. As a result, she was able to rule the nation of Judah for several years. She was also ungodly, like her parents, and didn't care at all about Judah's traditions. So Jehu's purge in the north destroyed her entire family. Her parents, her siblings, all of them died as a result of Jehu's purge. And that put her in a place of power in the south, where she had the free ability to reestablish a new northern kingdom. And in the transition, she changed the dating system to be like the northern kingdom, using the non-accession year reckoning. What about Israel? Well, Israel was ruled by Jehu after his purge. Jehu was just a general. He wasn't royalty until God sent a prophet to tell him that he was going to become king. He needed to secure his reign as a general. And as a matter of fact, if we look at external sources, which we haven't really been doing, but there are external sources that say very early in Jehu's reign, he paid tribute to Assyria. Very early, as in probably within the first few months of his reign, that was part of his top priority. Since Assyria is known to have used the accession year reckoning system, we can just hypothesize that maybe he was trying to follow suit with the people he wanted to impress. Maybe he had other reasons, but for whatever reason, he chose to change the kingdom back to accession year reckoning. As I said, that won't really come into play much until the end of the lesson when we look at another apparent contradiction. So now we continue on with historic period chapter 6. Let's go to 2 Kings. 2 Kings chapter 11. In these verses, we read about Athaliah's 7-year reign. Verses 1 through 4. And when Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son was dead, she arose and destroyed all the seed royal. But Jehosheba, the daughter of King Joram, sister of Ahaziah, took Joash, the son of Ahaziah, and stole him from among the king's sons which were slain. And they hid him, even him and his nurse, in the bedchamber from Athaliah, so that he was not slain. And he was hid with her in the house of the Lord 6 years, and Athaliah did reign over the land. In the 7th year, Jehoiada sent and fetched the rulers over hundreds. And then we go on and we read about how Jehoiada led a revolution against the wicked queen Athaliah and established Joash, or as we're going to call him in our series, Jehoash. The two names are used interchangeably, like Joram and Jehoram, before Jehu's purge. How Jehoash became king of the southern kingdom. So Athaliah's reign was 7 years, or partially 7 years, and she began her reign by killing all of her son's children, except for Jehoash, who was rescued by Ahaziah's sister. She reigned for 7 years until she was killed by an uprising, and she was succeeded by Jehoash, the son of Ahaziah. Jehoash, we find, reigned for 40 years. So we can go now to 2 Kings chapter 12, verse 1. In the 7th year of Jehu, Jehoash began to reign. And 40 years reigned he in Jerusalem. So Jehoash reigned 40 years. It began in Jehu's 7th year, and he started out as a good king. He started out under the guidance of Jehoiada, the prophet that we briefly mentioned just a few minutes ago in verse 4 of chapter 11. One of the things that he started by doing was rebuilding the temple. Let's jump down to verse 10. And it was so, when they saw that there was much money in the chest, that the king's scribe and the high priest came up, and they put up in bags, and told the money that was found in the house of the Lord. Then they gave the money, being told, into the hands of them that did the work, that had the oversight of the house of the Lord, and they laid it out to the carpenters and builders that wrought upon the house of the Lord, and to masons and hewers of stone, and to buy timber and hewed stone to repair the breaches of the house of the Lord, and for all that was laid out for the house to repair it. Howbeit there were not made for the house of the Lord bowls of silver, snuffers, basins, trumpets, any vessels of gold or vessels of silver of the money that was brought into the house of the Lord. But they gave that to the workmen and repaired therewith the house of the Lord. Moreover, they reckoned not with the men into whose hand they delivered the money to be bestowed on workmen, for they dealt faithfully. So the reign of Jehoash is marked by a period of revival in the nation of Judah, following wicked Queen Athaliah's short but impactful reign. The nation turned to God under his leadership. We see that because it wasn't just Jehoash's decision, you're going to build the temple. But we see this in verse 15. Notice that small detail that the people who are working on the temple were faithful in their work, so faithful that they didn't even need to do a reckoning on the money that was given to them. That indicates that there was a commitment to the work that was going on and a desire for the work to succeed. So we see that there is a real nation revival going on at this time. And he began well. Let's go over to 2 Chronicles and we'll read a cross-referenced passage here. 2 Chronicles chapter 24. And Joash did that which was right in the sight of the Lord all the days of Jehoiada the priest. So Joash did what was right. He started well, and the nation followed his leadership. But unfortunately, as we continue the story in this cross-section passage, we see that his heart was turned away from God by corrupt leaders. Let's look at verses 15 to 22. But Jehoiada waxed old, and was full of days when he died, and 130 years old was he when he died. And they buried him in the city of David among the kings, because he had done good in Israel both toward God and toward his house. Now after the death of Jehoiada came the princes of Judah and made obeisance to the king. Then the king hearkened unto them. And they left the house of the Lord God of their fathers and served groves and idols, and wrath came upon Judah and Jerusalem for this their trespass. Yet he sent prophets to them to bring them again unto the Lord, and they testified against them, but they would not give ear. And the Spirit of God came upon Zechariah, the son of Jehoiada. Now Jehoiada is that priest that was buried with the kings because of his godly influence. The Spirit of God came upon Zechariah, the son of Jehoiada the priest, which stood above the people, and said unto them, Thus saith God, Why transgress ye the commandments of the Lord, that ye cannot prosper? Because ye have forsaken the Lord, he hath also forsaken you. And they conspired against him, and stoned him with stones at the commandment of the king in the court of the house of the Lord. Thus Joash the king remembered not the kindness which Jehoiada his father had done to him, but slew his son. So we see that just a few short years after Jehoiada had died, Joash completely forgot all of the godly heritage that he had been given by this priest, and he turned and followed corrupt other corrupt leaders, the princes in Judah, and obeyed their influence in his life. And we see as we continue reading that his sin resulted in destruction, verses 23 to 25. And it came to pass at the end of the year that the host of Syria came up against him, and they came to Judah and Jerusalem and destroyed all the princes of the people from among the people. Those same people that had gotten him to turn away from God, those princes of Judah, these people were all destroyed by the armies of the Syrians, and sent all the spoil of them unto the king of Damascus. For the army of the Syrians came with a small company of men, and the Lord delivered a very great host into their hand, because they had forsaken the Lord God of their fathers. So they executed judgment against Joash. And when they were departed from him, for they left him in great diseases, his own servants conspired against him for the blood of the sons of Jehoiada the priest, and slew him on his bed, and he died. And they buried him in the city of David, but they buried him not in the sepulchres of the kings. What a sad ending for a man who had had such a strong beginning. And that brings us to our first application. Guard your heart with all diligence. You know, we see in the text a very precise moment when Joash decided that he didn't need to guard his heart. At the moment when he listened to the obeisance, the probably flattery of the princes of Judah, and he decided that he was going to go with them to transgress the law of God. At that moment, he failed to guard his heart. Let's look at Proverbs chapter 4. Verses 20 to 27. My son, attend to my words, incline thine ear unto my sayings. Let them not depart from thine eyes, keep them in the midst of thine heart, for they are life unto those that find them, and health to all their flesh. Keep thy heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. Put away from thee a froward mouth, and perverse lips put far from thee. Let thine eyes look right on, and let thine eyelids look straight before thee. Ponder the path of thy feet, and let all thy ways be established. Turn not to the right hand, nor to the left. Remove thy foot from evil. Ironically, these words were not that old when Joash would have been disobeying them. They would have been written by Solomon just maybe 100 years or so before. So, guard your heart. The path that you have been taught, the path that you have been shown by righteous leaders in your life. Focus on the path that is in front of you. Do not turn to the right hand, to the left hand. Keep your feet in the path. You have to wonder if Joash ever gave a second thought to where the trajectory of going on that tangent was going to lead him. He probably did not think that he was going to wind up dying in disgrace and at the hands of his own servants as he made that initial response to the flattery of his subordinates, of his princes. Beware the influence that will drive your heart from the path that you have been given. Continuing on, we see that Jehoash's 40-year reign saw a lot of change in the nation of Israel, the northern kingdom. It included Jehu's 7th through 28th years. It also included Jehoahaz's 17-year reign, and it had the first couple years of Joash of Israel. So this is where things can get confusing again. That's why I'm trying to refer to the southern king as Jehoash and the northern king as Joash, although, again, they are mixed sometimes in the record. He was succeeded by his son Amaziah in Joash's second year. And we'll skip reading that verse just for sake of time. Amaziah reigned for 29 years. He began Joash's second year, and he lost a very important battle against Israel. And as a result of his proud confrontation of the nation of Israel, he lived as a captive in Samaria for much of his reign. Let's go ahead and look at these verses because they lead into our next application. Chapter 14, verses 8 through 14. Then Amaziah sent messengers to Jehoash, the son of Jehoahaz, son of Jehu, king of Israel, saying, "Come, let us look one another in the face." So we have to just really quick think back to the context here. As Amaziah has just defeated a major enemy, he thinks in his pride that he is able to go against the northern kingdom of Israel. And he sends this message to the northern kingdom. This is the northern kingdom's response. And Jehoash, the king of Israel, sent to Amaziah, king of Judah, saying, "The thistle that was in Lebanon sent to the cedar that was in Lebanon, saying, 'Give thy daughter to my son to wife.' And there passed by a wild beast that was in Lebanon, and trode down the thistle. Thou hast indeed smitten Edom, and thine heart hath lifted thee up. Glory of this, and tarry at home. For why shouldest thou meddle to thy hurt, that thou shouldest fall, even thou and Judah with thee?" But Amaziah would not hear. Therefore Jehoash, king of Israel, went up, and he and Amaziah, king of Judah, looked one another in the face at Bethshemesh, which belongeth to Judah. And Judah was put to the worse before Israel, and they fled every man to their tents. And Jehoash, king of Israel, took Amaziah, king of Judah, the son of Jehoash, the son of Ahaziah, at Bethshemesh, and came to Jerusalem, and brake down the wall of Jerusalem from the gate of Ephraim unto the corner gate, 400 cubits. And he took all the gold and silver, and all the vessels that were found in the house of the Lord, and in the treasures of the king's house, and hostages, and returned to Samaria. And that was where Amaziah spent a large portion of his reign, exiled from his nation after having overseen a great defeat at the hands of Israel. In his absence, Azariah, his son, was made king or co-regent king of Judah. We see this in verse 21. And all the people of Judah took Azariah, which was 16 years old, and made him king instead of his father Amaziah. Notice that this is, just by the way, this is a movement of the people. It's not an official succession, and that's important as you date the kings. Israel did not recognize Azariah, however, until Amaziah's death, and that's when they officially began to date the next kings by Azariah's years instead of Amaziah's years. And here we have another application that is born out of the text with the life of Amaziah. Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. We just read those verses from 2 Kings chapter 14. The pride of Amaziah at his success in his battles against Edom lifted up his heart. And he tried to take on Israel, which was not a well-advised plan. And as a result, he was destroyed, his nation was destroyed, and suffered a serious loss at the hands of Israel. This verse, Proverbs 16:8, "Pride goeth before destruction, and an haughty spirit before a fall." We all need to beware the creeping up of pride in our hearts. It can come up so easily. But the moment of pride is the moment when you are setting yourself up for destruction. Pride puts you in a place where you think you can't fall. And as soon as you're in that place, beware, because falling is much easier. This is what happened to Amaziah. He thought he was too big, too good, too powerful to be defeated by his neighboring country. And as a result of his pride, he fell, and he fell a long way. So Amaziah, in his reign, it included Joash's of Israel's 2nd through 17th years, It also included the 1st through 15th solo years because Jeroboam II was a co-regent with Joash, and he died 15 years after Joash, king of Israel. We see that in 2 Kings 14, verse 17. He was co-regent with Azariah for 24 years. He only reigned for 29 years. It wasn't that long after he started his reign that he got lifted up with pride and was destroyed. And as a result, the people of Judah liked his son. We see that although Amaziah was allowed to come back to Jerusalem later, the people drove him out, and they went and chased him to another city where they assassinated him. So he was co-regent with Azariah for a total of 24 years, and this co-regency ended Jeroboam's 27th year, including his co-regency with his father, Joash. And that leads us to King Azariah, one of the longest reigning kings in Judah's history. He reigned for 52 years. And because he was installed as king, as a populist movement, a movement of the people, he did not have an accession year. He would have probably, most likely, begun as a co-regent at the point of New Year, because after not having a king for a while, the people of Judah would probably have made significant preparations to install him at the next available opportunity, which would have been Tishri. Thus, both dating systems would have given him the same number of years because he didn't have an accession year and he didn't have a partial year before his accession year. That's a side note. This reign began in Jeroboam II's 27th year, and it lasted until Pekah's second year, a total of 52 years. His reign really saw an awful lot of turnover in the northern kingdom. So we're going to go through these kings pretty quickly here. Jeroboam II, he reigned from his 27th through 41st years during Azariah's reign. He also was king during Zechariah's very brief 6 months as king, then Shallum's 1 month as king, followed by Menahem of Israel's 10-year reign, and then the first 2 years of, both years of Pekahiah's reign, and then the first and second year of Pekah's reign. And you could make an application here, which is not on your papers, but when you don't obey the ways that God has set up for you, as the northern kingdom was very obviously trying not to do, strife, contention, confusion, destruction, all are options and all will come to you. You can see that just by looking at what happened during one king of Judah's reign. He reigned for 52 years, and his reign overlapped 6 other men in the nation of Israel. That's a lot of turnover. Obviously, God was not able to bless the kings of the north because of their wickedness. And we could go through and make that point king by king in the northern kingdom by looking at all these verses. Azariah was succeeded by Jotham in Pekah's second year. And that brings us to Jotham's 16-year reign. We don't really know much about Jotham. It's kind of an interesting thing, and I think one reason for that, although he was a godly king, one reason we probably don't know too much about him is that from the text, which we're just about to look at, it becomes obvious that he was co-regent with his son Ahaz for much of his reign. And Ahaz was a larger figure in the Jewish record that's coming up in just a minute. So here's a potential question that someone might ask you. In 2 Kings chapter 15, verse 32, let's go ahead and read that. We read that Jotham reigned for 16 years. In the second year of Pekah, the son of Remaliah, king of Israel, began Jotham the son of Uzziah, Azariah and Uzziah are the same person, Jotham the son of Uzziah, king of Judah, to reign. 25 years old was he when he began to reign, and he reigned 16 years in Jerusalem. So he reigned 16 years by this record. But let's just go back 2 verses. Verse 30. And Hoshea the son of Elah made a conspiracy against Pekah the son of Remaliah, and smote him, and slew him, and reigned in his stead in the 20th year of Jotham the son of Uzziah. So just 2 verses before, we see that Pekah was assassinated the 20th year of Jotham, but 2 verses later, we see that Jotham only reigned for 16 years. And this is where that whole discussion at the beginning comes into play, because right here between verse 31 and 32 is a gap or a transition between 2 different authors' records that were put together. So if you overlay the 2, you are actually able to do so with a perfect symmetry by saying that Ahaz was co-regent with his father Jotham. The difference is not an error. The difference is caused by the change in source manuscripts. So Jotham's 20-year reign included Pekah's 2nd through 20th years, and it also included the beginning of Hoshea's reign after he assassinated Pekah. He was succeeded by Ahaz, his son, during Pekah's 17th year. However, he continued as a co-regent for 4 more years after his son succeeded him. So he would have still been honored as king, which apparently the northern kingdom was still doing when they recorded that he was reigning for 20 years when Hoshea assassinated Pekah. But the southern kingdom recognized his transition, Ahaz's transition to full power in Pekah's 17th year, although Jotham was still sitting on the throne and honored as king. And that brings us to Ahaz. Ahaz reigned for 16 years. He was an ungodly king, and he was co-regent with Jotham for 12 years. He began reigning officially his first year when he took the primary ownership of the throne in Pekah's 17th year, and he continued until Hoshea's 3rd year. He was succeeded by Hezekiah. Hezekiah reigned for 29 years, which began the 3rd year of Hoshea. Let's go ahead and look at these verses here. 2 Kings 18, verse 1. Now it came to pass in the 3rd year of Hoshea, son of Elah, king of Israel, that Hezekiah, the son of Ahaz, king of Judah, began to reign. He began the 3rd year of Hoshea in the northern kingdom, and just 6 years into his reign, Israel, the northern kingdom, was destroyed by Assyria. Verse 10. And at the end of 3 years, so they sieged Samaria for 3 years before destroying them. They took it, that is the Assyrians. Even in the 6th year of Hezekiah, that is the 9th year of Hoshea, king of Israel, Samaria was taken. So his reign included the destruction of Samaria. It also included a very significant victory over Assyria in his 14th year. Now let's go ahead and, I don't think we have time to read that whole long passage, but during this attack by Assyria, Hezekiah showed a remarkable amount of faith in God. He didn't panic. He took his problems to God, and God answered his prayer in a very dramatic way. And he had a major victory over the Assyrian army. Also in his 14th year, he received a promise of extended life. This must have been just shortly after God defeated Assyria for him. Let's go to verse 6 of chapter 20. God tells Hezekiah, as a result of his prayer, "And I will add unto thy days 15 years, and I will deliver thee and this city out of the hand of the king of Assyria, and I will defend this city for mine own sake and for my servant David's sake." So in his 14th year, he received a promise that he would reign for 15 more years. 14 plus 15 is 29, hence his 29-year reign. However, after his healing, he made a very significant mistake. Let's look at 2 Kings 20, verse 12, just a few verses later. At that time, oh boy, that's a name that's quite long. Berodach Baladan, the son of Baladan, king of Babylon, sent letters and a present unto Hezekiah, for he had heard that Hezekiah had been sick. And Hezekiah hearkened unto them and showed them all the house of his precious things, the silver and the gold and the spices and the precious ointment, and all the house of his armor, and all that was found in his treasures. There was nothing in his house, nor in all his dominion, that Hezekiah showed them not. Then came Isaiah the prophet unto King Hezekiah, and said unto him, What said these men, and from whence came they unto thee? And Hezekiah said, They are come from a far country, even from Babylon. And he said, What have they seen in thine house? And Hezekiah answered, All the things that are in mine house have they seen. There is nothing among my treasures that I have not showed them. And Isaiah said unto Hezekiah, Hear the word of the Lord. Behold, the days come, that all that is in thine house, and that which thy fathers have laid up in store unto this day, shall be carried into Babylon. Nothing shall be left, saith the Lord. And of thy sons that shall issue from thee, which thou shalt beget, thou shalt they take away, and they shall be eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon. Then said Hezekiah unto Isaiah, Good is the word of the Lord which thou hast spoken. And he said, Is it not good if peace and truth be in my days? Hezekiah showed Babylon, the emissary that came from Babylon, all of his treasures. And as a result, Isaiah came to him almost immediately from the narrative that we're given here. It's a very close association, just back-to-back events. And gave him a prophecy that Babylon was coming soon to destroy the nation of Judah. It's really the last event that's recorded in Hezekiah's reign in this book. The next thing that comes up is that he was succeeded by his son Manasseh. And that brings us now to our final application this evening. Just a thought from Hezekiah's life, and that is, God is not pleased when we selfishly, or you could even say proudly, claim our possessions for our own. We just read those verses there in 2 Kings chapter 20. Let's go ahead and turn to a very similar passage, Luke chapter 12. Verse 13, and continuing on. And one of the company said unto him, Master, speak to my brother, that he divide the inheritance with me. And he said unto him, Man, who made me a judge or a divider over you? And he said unto them, Take heed, and beware of covetousness, for a man's life consisteth not in the abundance of the things which he possesseth. And he spake a parable unto them, saying, The ground of a certain rich man brought forth plentifully. And he thought within himself, saying, What shall I do, because I have no room where to bestow my fruits? I don't have anywhere to put the stuff that I'm getting out of the ground, he says. And he said, This I will do. I will pull down my barns and build greater, and there will I bestow all my fruits and my goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, thou hast much goods laid up for many years. Take thine ease, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said unto him, Thou fool, this night thy soul shall be required of thee. Then whose shall those things be which thou hast provided? So is he that layeth up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. The irony in both of these is who gave the gifts. Hezekiah was king of Judah. Any treasures that the nation of Judah had were only because God had chosen this people and brought them from a miraculous history and given them a land that was not theirs, given them kings that had ruled mightily, and given them power to receive from their neighbors things that they really should not, by just normal flow of events, received. All of these things were gifts from God because God had chosen them. So then the irony is that Hezekiah takes these things that he has received from God as king of Judah, and he shows them to the emissary from the king of Babylon and says, look at all my stuff. Look at me. I am healed from my sickness. These are my treasures. They are in my house. And we see a very similar thing in the Luke passage. Presumably a farmer has done very well for himself. He has worked the ground hard. He has had bumper crops, and he's got too much. So he takes the stuff that he thinks he's going to be getting, and he tears down his barns. He's planning to live his days out in comfort and ease because they are the things that he has laid up for himself. Again, the irony being that God has given him the rain that made the fruit. And he made the ground fertile so that the fruit could grow. All of these things were given by God. And God is not pleased when we selfishly claim or treat the possessions that he has given us as our own without recognizing his goodness in giving them to us. And that is an unfortunate lesson from the life of King Hezekiah, because King Hezekiah was a godly king, and he showed a great amount of faith. But that is where we leave off for tonight. Next week, when we come back, we'll start up with the solo kingdom. It can't be a divided kingdom if there's no northern kingdom anymore. So the kingdom of Judah until the exile, and then going until Jesus, and that'll take us to the end of the series. So at this time, let's get out our prayer sheets, and we'll take some prayer requests.